they're compromised, they're implicated. See, this is the problem. I remember years ago I interviewed Harry Wu, who wrote Bitter Winds. He was in the Laogai for 19 years. That's the Chinese gulag. And what Harry Wu said to me, I said, how would you characterize the Chinese leadership? He said, murderers. What about, you know, all these economic deals? What about doing business with them? He said, you are an accessory to murder if you do business with them. See, you're compromised right there. When you get involved with people who are murderers, and these aren't just murderers, these are experts at compromising you. And just, you know, Nixon sitting down with Mao Zedong, for example, just that picture, an American president giving legitimacy to the biggest mass murderer in history, Mao Zedong, that should have never happened. Where was the moral discernment there? And this is really a moral issue that if you are trying to, you know, there are moral principles. This is what we've set aside in this country in the last 50 years. And this is where it's gotten us. Okay, we're going to make money. Those moral principles, they're murderers. Nah, you know, we're just going to go with and make a deal because it's good for capitalism. That's not the kind of capitalism you want. And it is damaged our system. They've used it to compromise people, to damage our economic system, to get into our tech sector. Look at the Emory. Emory University that feeds the CDC. A friend of mine said, look, between 10 and 15% of the faculty there are Chinese nationals, and not just Chinese nationals, but Chinese nationals from high-level Communist Party families.
Right.
What are they doing in there? How many of them are being fed into the CDC and the National Institutes of Health, and what kind of compromise? Look, you probably saw, you know, my article last week was on this Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer's book, which is about the Marxist takeover of America, specifically at the Pentagon. I mean, they're literally using critical race theory to divide and conquer and to demoralize our own service men and women. Right? So if they're able to, you know, the job of the generals at the Pentagon are to raise the morale of our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Forces, but instead they're destroying it. So if they can do that within the Pentagon, our main defensive structure, could they possibly get into the National Institutes of Health and our big pharma, which has been in bed with the Chinese companies for a long time now, for decades? Could they have gotten into there and kind of pushed this messenger RNA vaccine idea, knowing that this could be a damaging approach for us, discrediting our own institutions and hurting a lot of people in this country? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, clearly that's possible.
And there's an influence operation, because just think how you've compromised. Who's going to blame? You're going to say, oh, well, the Chinese ran an operation and they convinced. I recently did an interview, this is on my site, with the leaders of the Hong Kong Independence Party. And that was posted last Thursday, I think. No, last Friday. And these guys in the interview, in the middle of the interview, I asked them about the virus, you know, and they said, oh, your Fauci is a CCP spy. And we have letters, they said. And I said, well, what makes you say that? What is the information you have? And they said, well, in 2017, he knew this pandemic was coming. Well, you know, Viktor Suvorov knew in 2017. And I want to go back to this Viktor Suvorov thing. When I saw this pandemic, I knew the effector literature. This is what you call the overture period. This is a move they make before all-out war. Right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, go ahead and complete your thought, but that's where we've got to go next, is for you to explain to our audience this blueprint. You know the blueprint very well, but what happens next?
Well, okay. There's very interesting things. The Chinese are telling their people all good Chinese should come home from abroad, and we were seeing this last year. Last year, during the late winter and spring, they were recalling a lot of their students. They were recalling certain people from this country, people they didn't need to be here. And the Russians are doing the same thing now. The Russians are saying that Russians should return from abroad. And the U.S. State Department issued a circular. They are downsizing their consular support for Americans in Russia. There is not going to be a renewal of visas for Americans in Russia. And at the same time, the State Department is advising that Americans should leave Russia by the 15th of June because of the non-renewal of, now I had a friend who called contact in the State Department, what's going on over there? And they said, well, you know, we don't want to be caught short, but there may be a conflict between Russia and the United States before the middle of August, and we want to make sure that people aren't stuck there and interned, right? Because if you're working over there, if you're doing something over there and a war begins, you get interned. That is basically jail, right?
Right.
So you got to give people fair warning, and this is what's going on. And they know this for their nationals. They like, come home because they're going to be interned if we end up in a war here. Then there's the other really strange order out of Moscow. Moscow also, this is June 15th, again, this date keeps coming up. Moscow, you know, there's a labor shortage in Russia because all countries that have a low birth rate have labor shortages. So they're using Central Asian workers in a lot of Russia's big cities. And so they have told, and they've allowed undocumented workers from Central Asia in Russia to work. They've said all of these undocumented Central Asian workers need to go home by June 15th. Now, I have puzzled this out. I mean, you have a labor shortage in a country, you're telling these people to go home by June 15th. Why? And plus, you've got all these cyclical Russian mobilizations where they're mobilizing people out of their civilian jobs, men, putting them out and for training, extended training exercises, rotating them in and out. So this exacerbates your labor shortage. So what's going on? And the thing is here's the thing that really is scary. The only analysis me and my friends can come up with is that if you are going to have a nuclear war and you have to put, Russia has massive blast and fallout shelter protections for its cities. If you're going to put the population of Moscow, if you're going to put more than 10 million people underground for up to 2 weeks, you don't want a bunch of undocumented foreign people down there eating your water, eating your food, drinking your water, and sharing that cramped space with Russians. Right. So you're going to ask them to go home before the war starts. That's my analysis of this. And
so does this involve conflict over Ukraine? Or
well, the guy at the State Department thought that it was Ukraine, but I'm not so sure. Look, everybody thinks, this is sort of the conventional wisdom, everybody thinks that China's going to attack Taiwan and Russia's going to attack Ukraine, and they're going to do it at the same time so that we can't react. I'm afraid it's much more serious than that, because the actual military strategy of Russia and China is, why destroy their strategic position if they're breaking with the West and they can't play this game, and they need, by the way, they need credits, they need technology from us. If they break with us, from that moment they break with us, their economies start on a downward slope. I mean, people don't realize how vulnerable, we're vulnerable to the Chinese economy, but they're really vulnerable to us. China can't feed itself. That's a major problem. We don't know what their food stockpiles are. Russia is more autarkic. Russia's economy is less vulnerable. It's Europe that's really vulnerable here in terms of, Russian gas and so on, but and natural resources and strategic minerals, or strategic metals. The thing that we're seeing unfolding here is that it's thought, I've talked to some, bankers and people in the economic position, that it's a real danger of war when we are separated from the Chinese economy, because they're looking at their economy running down and switching over to a war economy, and they kind of have to go to war, maybe, that's what the thinking is, if we cause them a big enough economic damage, because you got 1.4 billion people. If the Chinese economy takes a hit and the Chinese economy goes into recession or depression, you're going to have major unrest in China. You can have, that country can fall apart. And the only way they can hold it together might be to have an external enemy and to go to war with that external enemy.
It's reminding me of World War II, the United States Navy oil embargo of Japan, sort of forcing Japan's hand into striking Pearl Harbor, because without oil, Japan's leadership knew that their economy would be crushed. They're not a big oil producer domestically, obviously. Does it seem, I mean, what you're describing seems similar in that case, except there's a lot more at stake now. I mean, 1.4 billion people, food shortage, plus don't forget, I mean, according to some of my other sources, the United States has been deploying weather weapons. I don't know if you believe in weather weapons, but my sources say weather weapons have been deployed against China even last year to cause floods and cause food shortages, and that's continuing right now. So it seems like we're at war. It's just a covert war that's about to go into a kinetic phase, perhaps.
Well, we've been at, look, the Cold War never ended. If you look at the defector literature, the collapse of the Soviet Union was a deception operation that went a little bit awry that set the former Soviet Union back. But they were trying to deceive us. They were trying to break up NATO by doing this maneuver, and it kind of backfired on them a bit. But, and of course, the Sino-Soviet split, I believe from research, and people like Nevin Gusak that have done deeper research in this, and people like the late James Angleton and Anatoly Golitsyn believe that the China-Soviet split was a maneuver to get us to come in and build up a communist country, China. And that the socialist camp is what they, in their military literature, they call themselves, has now militarily built itself up. We've been deceived, fighting wars in Iran and Afghanistan, being completely tricked. Our capitalists got into bed with them, got compromised, got all messed up, got exploited by these clever games. I mean, look at what happened to BMW in China. They go into China and China goes, oh, you've been breaking our rules. You owe us $2 billion. Well, BMW moved its plant there. What are they going to do? They got to pay the $2 billion? I mean, this is like hostage taking, right? So what's happened is that what's really happening is that China has basically lured us in. We moved our industrial base there because of their cheaper labor. They lured us with the cheaper labor and the prospect of money. And now they're just starting to dictate. They're starting to behave badly, this pandemic. And then it's like, everybody's realizing, oh my gosh, this is a snake and it just bit us. And so we're like strangling the snake, and the snake has already bit us. It's like we made terrible choices, strategic choices, because our experts did not do their homework, did not follow the defector literature. Look, for years, I would say to other people who were, I'd say, these defectors are saying this. Oh, you don't read defectors. Defectors are traitors. It's like, no, defectors went over to our side. They're trying to warn us. And there's a consistency in what they're saying. There's a mapping here. And I think, a lot of people have the idea that, this is all, that the Chinese and the Russians are just playing it by ear and going, no. They have a long-term strategy. And at the end of that strategy, there is a plan of attack. That when they get to the point that they are now, they start playing attack cards.
Many people believe that an attack, a kinetic attack on America is very, very close, perhaps this summer or later this year. Two big news stories, I know you're familiar with these. The 200 square miles of land purchased in Texas by the Chinese billionaire Su, it's his last name, I forgot the rest of his name, who owns, I think, 2/3 of the land in the Xinjiang province where they have slave labor camps. So, and this was purchased right next to a military installation. We've seen people speaking out about this. The Texas legislature is aware of this. They're trying to find ways to stop it. But why would a Chinese billionaire buy 200 square miles of land in Texas next to a military base? And then the other part of this question, and I'll let you answer this, is the mysterious custom drone that was spotted over Tucson, reported on by the FBI, chased by the Tucson police helicopters. It was a very capable drone. My sources told me it's a Chinese drone launched from Mexico, and it was spying on the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base using thermal cameras, and it is a stealth drone that evaded all air traffic control radar. So what do you make of those two data points?
Well, let me show you a book, and I talked to this guy for years. I don't know if you can see this or not.
Silent Invasion.
By Scott Gulbranson.
Got it.
Now, this book came out, gosh, I think it's 2002, 2003. Scott was a reporter for the San Diego newspaper. He befriended a Tijuana policeman who said, look, I want to show you something. I want to tell you what's going on here in Mexico. This Tijuana policeman who was, it's corrupt down there. He was working for some mafia down there. And he said, they had me drive out a truckload of supplies to this encampment out in the desert. And there were Russian, Chinese, and Cuban commandos out there in this encampment. And they had a giant tent, and they had like a display board up with a map of the border area. And he said this Tijuana policeman started getting worried about what was going on. Now, down in Ensenada in Baja, the Chinese have been operating that port, Chinese ships offloading, and this Tijuana policeman took him down to talk to fishermen who had seen weapons being offloaded at night into Mexico from China. And these weapons were being moved into Mexico, and they were being stockpiled. And Gulbranson believed that some of these weapons were being moved across the border into the United States. Now, what makes that interesting is Colonel Stanislav Lunev had told me, I had had a lot of discussions with him about war strategy. And at the last time he was at GRU headquarters, it was all about this, this plan that China and Russia had together,
right,
to bomb and invade the United States, where Russia's going to take Alaska and parts of Canada, and China's going to invade the lower 48. And it very much meshes with the secret speech of Chiao Chen that a lot of people say, oh, no, it's just phony. There's so much things in there that dovetail with things that Lunev told me. And look, these things I didn't talk about. He passed away a year ago last May. I really couldn't say anything about it, but this is just like right up and down with what he said. The generals, Russia and China had negotiated in 1991, early 92, deals with China about a future war against America. The first big deal they made was to share all intelligence. So all Chinese and Russian intelligence operations and influence operations and so on in the United States, they share everything with each other. Agent information, coordination on certain things. And this is my warning to people who are patriots. You're going to be infiltrated. You got to look at people really carefully. You cannot be naive, because they're going to try to set you up. They're going to try to feed you false information, lead you down the garden path to do things. They want to divide and conquer America. They want to have us at each other's throats at the eve of war. And here is the big, look, you want to know the big sign that war is just weeks away? When suddenly massive amounts of scandalous information about our leaders, about our generals, about our politicians and businessmen comes out all at once. Things that discredit almost everybody. Oh, wow. I thought he was my hero. Oh my gosh, this is terrible about him. It's not just about Hunter Biden. It's going to be about, and some of the information is going to be false, but a lot of it's going to be true, because the Russian and Chinese services have been gathering dirt on everybody in our system. And look at how many,
Look at how quickly the Fauci emails came out, where they could never find Hillary Clinton's emails, not for 5 or 6 years, but wow, Fauci's emails come out and they're damning. So the question is, I was suspicious. The Washington Post is who put in that FOIA request. Washington Post is the CIA, mouthpiece.
Right. Well, the CIA is sort of the English-speaking branch of the KGB, really. They were infiltrated at the beginning of there, and there was always problems. On his deathbed, James Angleton made some confessions, and he said, you know what, I'm going to hell with the rest of them, because I knew there was something wrong with these guys, and I wasted my life trying to fight the Soviets, and these guys were probably Soviet agents all along. He's talking about his bosses at the CIA. If you read the history of the CIA, it's the gang that couldn't shoot straight. The Russians were always one step ahead of them. They were always losing. They were always making these dreadful errors. And it's not an accident. And it's not an accident now. Look, this new Chinese defector, you've probably seen the news.
Yeah.
The Defense Intelligence Agency had to hide this defector from the FBI and the CIA, because this defector said, your FBI and CIA are full of CCP spies.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. The DIA hid this person. Yes.
Yeah. And this is what I've been saying for years, the degree of compromise. We don't begin to understand. Look, these people are trained. They're very clever. They tell you what you want to hear. They know, they study us. And look, I went to school with these people who became analysts. I didn't, because I was anti-Marxist. And even these conservative people, they had to say certain things or they weren't going to get their career path. And so I looked at these people and I said, look, what about this? What about that? No, they were sort of in this lockstep mind thing where they wouldn't believe certain things about Russia, about China. They wouldn't look at the defector literature. They wouldn't put it together right. They were trying to put everything together wrong. And so the Chinese agents come up and they give them more information that fits in with all the other wrong stuff they know. So it's confirmation bias, right?
Right.
So the enemy agents are confirming what they already think. And so people like me on the outside, oh, he's just a kook. You're trying to warn them. And look, you go back, I wrote The Origins of the Fourth World War between 1987 and 1991. And then it was published in 98. I said in there, China and Russia are going to get together and they're going to go after the United States at the same time. That's where this is headed. We're going to disarm. We're going to find ourselves caught short and they're going to be able to pummel us. That's basically the theme of the book. And that this is why we're corrupt. We're morally corrupt. We're intellectually corrupt. And we've fallen for all their tricks. It's basically what I say in the book. And guess what? It's happened. And yet I still can't get people, just a handful of people to listen because they're still fixated. Right now, what Washington's trying to do, why Biden's meeting with Putin, it's like, oh my gosh, we might have a war with China. We better be friends with Russia. We're going to play the Russia card. Are you serious? You tried to play the China card and you moved your industrial base to China and now you're going to play the other one? You're just going to be double played now.
What you're describing here is a pretty horrifying picture. Is there any way that this is stopped and that America defends itself and survives this?
Yeah, my analysis still stands from, I did, 4 years of work on the origins of the Fourth World War. And I was just basically, studying everything I could. And of course, I'm still learning. I've still, the last 33 years has been a massive learning curve for me. And I'm learning new things all the time. But one thing the communists don't understand is economics. In the communist, it's a philosophy. It's not an ideology. It's a worldview that thinks of itself as scientific. And they have, a lot of Marx is critiquing our economics, free market economics. They want to believe there's a socialist man, a Soviet man out there, that once you destroy this greed, this profit motive, the things that, that Adam Smith said, look, greed, if you use greed in the right way, it can be a good thing, right? You get a lot out of it because people have incentives. The market system works. Well, they don't really believe that. They think that they can use computers or other ways of doing things. And again, they fall down whenever they do this. Look, the Chinese and Russian economies, they're state capitalist economies. Lenin, everybody in everybody thinks the communist systems in those countries were communist economic systems. There is no communist economic system. Marx never described it. Lenin never described it. They're following a peculiar form of capitalism that allows them to build up their military. Their own people live at as low a level. The Soviet Union, Soviet economy is based on the restriction of consumption. You go back to Alec Nove's Economic History of the USSR. And why is it they restrict consumer consumption so that all the capital can go into heavy industry and military industry? And same thing with all the scientific development. It's, Russian cars are still junk. If you're driving around in Russia, you better be driving a BMW or a Mercedes because your car's going to break down if it's made in Russia. So because everything's for their rockets, for their tanks, for their aircraft and their missiles. And so and everybody says, oh, the Russian economy, it's only the size of New York. No, you're not. You're using our measurements. You're not understanding. Their military now is ahead of ours, the Russian, in technology. They're fifth generation weapons. Chinese have some of those weapons from the Russians. Chinese army is the biggest one in the world. Chinese Navy is now the biggest one in the world. Their missiles have real reach. Yeah.
Nuclear-powered hypersonic cruise missiles out of Russia.
Yeah. The Russians can have a cruise missile. It can dance around the world and then decide what it's going to hit.
That's crazy. I still don't understand how you can have a nuclear-powered cruise missile, but apparently they do.
They do. They have, when Putin trotted out these weapons in 2018 and he thanked, look, Russia is peppered with scientific cities, secret scientific cities. And they're not all Russian scientists, by the way. They have lured a lot of scientists from Western countries, from Central European countries. I knew an American and he knew a Czech family in Prague, and their son was a scientist and he'd been lured to Russia, and he said he lived like a king. He lived in this secret, everything was catered to him. It was like a luxury apartment, and the work was interesting, but making weapons. And in 2018, in his State of the Russian Federation speech, he showed this. It was a giant, he showed all these weapons, laser weapons in the army, already good to go. Missiles, carrier striking missiles that could go Mach 10, eluding the missiles that could go Mach 20.
Wow.
Talking about a submarine, a robot submarine that could go 100 miles an hour underwater and carry a 200 megaton warhead. Yeah.
Rapid underwater Soviet drones and so on. Meanwhile, the U.S. Pentagon is just running, woke recruitment ads. Oh, my two mommies wanted me to join the army to be a mortar technician. And it's all about wokeism instead of national defense. And our military is aging, and our, the new fighter, the F-35, barely functions.
Yes. Yeah. And they have problems with the carriers. The carriers are messed up. The new ones messed up. We've got all kinds of problems in our military, and maybe some of it is sabotage. Maybe there's just, you can't get good help anymore. There's a kind of cultural degeneration, a degeneration of the work ethic, a degeneration of honesty and decency in the country. And this is a real problem for us. And we, people think of America as invincible. This idea that we're invincible, by the way, there are no invincible countries. There are no, as Stalin said, there are no invincible armies, right? And we are now the giant with feet of clay. But getting back to your question about how we survive, what I was going to say is that when the biggest problem that these people have is that you'll notice there's been a lot of things in the news about Russia and China stockpiling. Spare parts, oil, gold, everything you need for a war so that their economies can continue to function, because they need inputs from the West. And China's been trying to buy up food frantically on the world markets. I think Argentina had to shut down their food sales because they were afraid they'd short their own people of food if they kept selling to China. So they're getting ready for a war. It's rather obvious, all the markers are there. And so
how long do we have? I mean, we're almost out of time for this interview today. How long do we have before war?
Well, what I've heard is from Beijing is it's not years away, it's months away. That's the word that I have. And the June 15th date is anytime from June 15th to the end of October, I think it could start. I hope they changed their mind. In 1983, they did change their mind. But we're living in a very dangerous moment.
What would the first wave attack from China look like? Cyber warfare on the power grid, or nuclear, biological, another weapon release?
Well, their doctrine is to continue to hit us with cyber attacks, to continue to disrupt. This is a preparatory period, but the actual attack is, their doctrine is to use your most terrible weapon first. Probably a really serious biological attack is where you have really high casualties. And I don't know how the vaccine relates to that. And then trying to get us into a civil war situation, trying to get us into chaos, collapse our economy. If our economy collapses, if our systems start to go down, if we start to go blind, like for example, and our power, we lose all of our power from maybe cyber attacks or EMP attacks or whatever, you can expect nuclear attacks to follow an EMP attack within, 48 to 72 hours. And the nuclear attacks would be aimed at our military infrastructure. They could strike cities that they think could reconstitute military structures, wherever they would hit the oil industry in Texas, the refineries. They would hit oil refineries. And if they went for the political leadership, they may spare some states. They would go for state capitals in Washington. Those are the main cities they would hit.
Well, maybe there would be retaliation strikes from our nuclear submarines.
That depends on whether they can neutralize the the mechanism for sending the permissive action codes to the submarines. Our submarine commanders don't have the ability to launch on their own. They have to receive those codes. And the way to stop the submarines from firing is to attack the system that transmits those permissive action codes to the submarine commanders.
Okay, you're freaking me out, and but this is very important information. People need to get prepared. We're going to have to talk again soon. I hope you'll be available to do that.
Now, we've been warning our audience to get prepared, and we've been warning for quite some time. Even back during the administration of Trump, we knew things were not right. I wasn't totally on the Trump bandwagon, though I did appreciate the policies that seemed to go into a line with a conservative in a constitutional way. Something about it just didn't seem right, and sure enough, it didn't pan out the way we expected or the way many people expected. Now, what I'm telling you is you have to be prepared for infrastructure grid down scenarios. That's why we're offering the satellite phones. Satellite phones, you can get them for free right now until they run out, but you're paying for the monthly service, which is $100 a month, rollover minutes. You got a free rollover minutes. You've got the free phone, and you can get the solar panel or what they call the Faraday bag. Faraday bag will keep it from an EMP. You're going to need to communicate. You need to get your food. You need to get your water set up. You need to be away from major population centers for when everything goes down. And I'm just telling you what God personally, what my relationship with God has alerted me to for some time. I've already seen what I think is to come, and I just need to warn everyone that's in my audience that has ears to hear and that has eyes to see. You want to get connected to our network, satellite, get a satellite phone. Let me know. Get on our social media, connect to our satellite group. We're going to be putting up together. And if you go over to Tina's website, you go over to sat123.com. The links are in below. Make sure you go with the AJ plan. Scroll down, find the AJ plan. That's where you get the free phone. Tell them Blazing Press sent you. Get this Faraday bag with it. There's another option. You can ask them on the chat that you want the Faraday bag, the waterproof case, and the solar panel kit, the solar panel charger. This is what this is right here. You want to get the solar panel charger. It'll charge your cell phones. It'll charge your sat phone. Food, water, self-defense, prepare for grid down scenario, insulate from large populations, have a bug out place, understand what it means to survive off grid. You're going to have to understand how to grow food. There's a lot that we talk about here, but we're going to save that for another night about survival type techniques. On top of that, I just want to say the Lord bless you.